Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, dear Anita, Lisa Lang, thank you for the invitation, first of all. And yes, it might be a long title, and it might be that to explain Europe might be one of the most important issues in these days. But let me start with something relatively unusual for an overweight 50-year-old European politician. Let me start with a love letter. I mean, might be relatively unusual, but what you're doing is simply amazing. And this discussion is really at the top of the discussion globally. And before I start about what politically, what kind of backing we might be able to give, I would like you to understand that we are more curious than you think, and we might look a little bit strange and being a little bit elder and wearing suits, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we are not curious. And out of that curiosity, the Parliament has the right to decide to set up 10 issues per term where we say that might be important for the future of Europe. And one of the issues, and that got the most votes in the Parliament, had been a non-permanent committee I was founding together with a French colleague, Pavanche Perez, on the creative industries. And that is amazing because it's not understood what importance that has for the European economy. We learned during the last years that the creative industry is the big industry in Europe. It's bigger than the automotive industry. I mean, the turnaround of creative industry ranging from design to fashion, ranging from artists, so the more artist angle of that, to archives, to the movies and so on, so is 500 billion euros per year. That's 5% of the GDP in Europe. But the curiosity is not the curiosities in the figures. The curiosity is what you're doing. And the amazing thing in terms of fashion for us, and specifically about Fashiontech, is that you're not just talking about fashion. You might talk about what people are going to do, how they are going to live. It might be that you are one of the discussion panels now where people talk about how we live in the future. And that is exciting, and that's the reason for the love letter in the beginning. Two issues I would like to address before I would like to introduce a colleague from the Commission side, Agnieszka Wojdyr, who is much smarter than me and much better looking. Actually, it's interesting that globally, when we talk to the Americans, when we talk to Asia, and we talk about Berlin, they're all staring at you. I mean, for the first time, and that shows you the dimension, what's going on in global terms, is for the first time, the United States, President Obama in 2015 announced a fund of roughly 150 million euros for a new textile innovation, for a new fiber innovation institute in the United States. And the explanation for that, and that's really interesting, he was explaining that the United States want to remain at the top of the development. And in the reference and explanatory tale, they're looking at Europe. They're saying there is something happening in Europe, and more specifically, it's also happening here in Germany, which might change a lot of things, not just fashion. It might change a lot of, in terms of lifestyle, a lot of, in terms of what will be the distribution of goods, and what will be, how that will shape, to some extent, society. And I don't want to overdo that. I just want to explain you that it's interesting if you go in these days to Hermès, to the board, or if you go to China, they're pretty much saying, what would happen if in Europe and to some extent in Germany, the industry, the technical abilities of the industry would join up with creativity? And what you're doing there is an exciting process. I mean, we are funding out of the European funds projects of a new generation of plastic bags. Sounds boring. But the interesting thing, we're talking about textures which might be blue for a year and green the next year, and the year after they're vanishing. I mean, vanishing textiles is a strange idea in terms of fashion, but practically we are talking about a revolution. We are talking about that we are might leave the cotton world. We're talking about really solutions for sustainability. And that is pretty much the reason why we're so curiously looking at you, why we all over political groups founded that Intergroup on the creative industry, that we are going to fund things, that we are looking on the financial sector side. We are really interested in what you're doing. I mean, we are interested in the smallest entity actually now trying to found their business and actually trying to get into the market. And we have to look on that, how to finance that, how to make the financial sector understand what you're doing. We are reaching out for the big industry, for technologies. We're reaching out for creativity. And that's an alignment which is understood in the rest of the world as something relatively unique to Europe and specifically associated also to the site in Berlin. So what I'm going to say is, yes, we're talking about politics, and these days we really want to explain the European project because that has something to do with the freedom of creativity, that has something to do with the freedom of traveling, it has something to do that you're not somehow reduced to a national identity or something like that. That's truly European. So we are curious, we are coming, we are listening, we want to do something, and it's just that we open our hands and we try to explain a little bit to what extent we already prepared for that, what would be the backing we're going to give. And that is pretty much the reason why now Agnieszka is going to get you a little bit an idea what are already existing instruments and what might be the future. So thank you very much for your attention, and what you're doing here is just amazing. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here. It's really an amazing experience. Thank you, Mr. Ehler, for this nice introduction. I think I can say that I'm one of the curious people, and at the same time, I work at the European Commission. And I would like to tell you just very briefly what we do also for the Fashiontech, and what are the opportunities that we can offer to all of you. So I work in a department dealing actually with companies, with small and medium-sized businesses, with the industry. And just very briefly, we have been supporting the fashion industry, the entire value chain of the fashion industry for a long time. In 2013, we had an action plan with a number of concrete actions focusing on skills, on innovation, on protection of intellectual property, and so on. At the same time, the Commission is really now supporting the digital economy. So we had a very important policy document recently about digitizing the European industry, and it talks about two things. About, on the one hand, that we need the new technologies, we need to support the development of the new technologies, but we also need to support digitizing other industry sectors, those that are sometimes more traditional. So there is a lot about standards, architecture, but there are also some concrete actions in this strategy. So for instance, we have some large-scale pilots, so it's really including on wearables and on smart living, so it's really to test new technologies, to work on standards. We'll have about 100 million per year for digital innovation hubs. So we want to link different innovation hubs that exist already in different countries. In the UK, it's the Catapult. In Germany, I'm sure that you also have them. They work with companies, and there'll be money for different projects. And also for you as a startup community, it might be interesting that we also have a new startup initiative. So at the time being, if you are interested, you just Google EU Startup Initiative Public Consultation, and you can reply to a questionnaire and tell us, okay, this is what we need, this is what is missing, and we are really interested in having your views. Okay, but this is, let's say, very general. Is there something that really where you can be involved as companies, as organizations? So actually we have a couple of projects where you can really be practically involved. So from 2013 we had a pilot action, and it's really along the lines that the big companies, big brands here were discussing. So we put together manufacturing companies, very small companies often, and we put them with designers and with technology companies, and they had to work on new products, innovative products. But the most important factor was this collaboration between them. So we gave them up to 10,000 euros to develop the products, but we also offered them extensive coaching, which was done by the two organizations, the London College of Fashion and the Institut Français de la Mode. So they really supported each partnership from the beginning to the end, to the commercial, almost to the commercialization phase. So in the pilot, we were able to finance 34 partnerships. And this was with about 1 million euros. So just to give you an idea of projects that we finance, these are the sound steps that are developed by Ricardo, who is actually here, and he has a small exhibition downstairs. This is a technology that already existed, sleep-enhancing headphones, and they worked with a designer on the whole aesthetic aspect, but also on the functionality. And this is maybe not a big technology breakthrough to you, but it was for this small jewelry designer who always worked manually, never did anything innovative, and he got to work with the 3D printers, and he printed this really complex ring that is now sold in Colette in Paris, for instance. This is finished, but the good news is that we will continue with this project. So this time we have more money. We have 5.5 million euros. So we hope to finance 150 partnerships, and we also want to extend the whole technology part of this, because we see really the innovation potential in this. So now we have an open call for organizations. So we will select a consortium of organizations that will manage the whole project for us. And then next year, they will open calls for designers, for companies who really want to take part in the project, and they will select the best ones, the ones that have the best ideas. And we also want this consortium to create a platform, a sort of internet platform, interactive, where people can also meet, and if they have an idea, they're looking for someone to work with, they can do this on that platform. Another measure, another action, but it's still, let's say, in the development phase. I'm waiting for the confirmation if I can get some funding for this. It's to create a network of incubators, accelerators, business support centers in Europe that would actually work on the fusion of technology and creativity. So they will bring the two communities together, something like the Electroculture actually does here in Berlin, but on a European scale, they would link the two communities. They would support the best, the most promising startups. They would also work on new business models, on new support measures for those companies that are sometimes, on the borders of fashion and technology. They would also work, for instance, with venture capital, business angels to facilitate access to finance. So this I will have confirmation only in September if this project can go ahead. And of course, there's many other possibilities under different EU programs. So we have this big Horizon 2020, which is a research innovation program. And there's something interesting. So we have launched last year, the STARTS Award. So it's to award a collaboration between artists, technology, and science. And actually last week, it was announced that Iris van Herpen received one of the prizes. So it's really in the Fashiontech. I hope this will be also great publicity for all of you and for the work you do. So this will continue yearly. We have 2 prizes per year, 20,000 euros. But we have also enormous amounts of money to do research, for instance, in textiles, in smart textiles, in new materials. I mentioned the pilots on wearables. We have the SME instrument where basically very small companies can apply just with a simple idea and they can get like 50,000 euros funding. So there is a lot of things. I don't have the time to talk about everything, but you can also contact me. And I'd be happy also to answer to your questions today. Thank you very much.